Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 42 for Monday, November 10th. My name is Farbod Merkazi, here as always with Jace Hatfield. Jace, what's going on?
Not much. Got my fantasy teams locked in for today. We're recording this at the Germany game, I believe it's being played in. I'm doing well. Ducks got a big win yesterday. Michigan State hoops for our college basketball fans got a big win over Arkansas. It was a good sports day for me. Washington lost.
Yeah. Well, the real UW was determined yesterday on the field, so we'll get into that game. We obviously, you mentioned the Oregon game. We're going to talk about the American Conference mess that's going on. Tulane beat Memphis. TC is a shit show right now in terms of just rankings and standings. Indiana barely survives against Penn State, and then Jace has a not a rant, but like a take that we want to talk about just the general sports coverage media. That we're gonna get into all of that towards the end of the show. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at F4Discussion, on YouTube. Subscribe to us at flaggedfordiscussion, and then we're on TikTok at flag4discussion. Week 11 recap show. A lot of things happened yesterday. I think we went into this weekend saying there's a couple really good games, and then outside of that, maybe it's the game that you could go. It's the weekend you could go to, like the pumpkin patch with a significant other, or it's the week. But it's still proved to be just an absolutely nuts weekend. We're going to get into Oregon, Iowa right now. Oregon goes into Iowa City, rainy, windy weather. Dante Moore throws for just 112 yards, but he made the passes that were needed. It was a completely calm game if you were an Oregon fan, I guess. No. But this Oregon ends up winning 18-16 on a game-winning field goal. This game was like infuriating if you were an Oregon fan, but also super calm for most of it. I don't know how to describe like my opinions when I was watching the game.
Yeah, I feel like on one hand, they ran for 263 yards, over 7 yards per carry. The way they dominated in the trenches was not only really reassuring to see your team do that in a game where a lot of talking heads, whether it was truthful or not, that were questioned if Oregon could win this kind of game, that question if Oregon was big, physical, and tough. That we'll save the rant on that for later. But that was the narrative for some people going into it. So it was really satisfying to prove that narrative wrong, even though I think true college football fans and Oregon fans knew they had the toughness in them. I think the frustrating part came from stalling out in the red zone, being able to run the ball all over them, get to the red zone and stop doing it, and kind of get away from what was working was frustrating. I think just some of the way the game went with some of the calls that went against Oregon was frustrating, but overall, a very impressive win. I think we've seen some articles written about how it was a lucky win or they escaped with a win. I thought it was a really impressive win.
Bullshit.
In the pouring rain, cold. The day before, Friday night at about 8 p.m. Eastern, a tweet gets sent out that is DeCorian Moore, their leading receiver, Kenyon Sadiq, their second leading receiver, and their starting right tackle, and one of their linebackers, one of their few linebackers, all got hurt in practice. And then you wake up Saturday morning, and that is true, and all four of them didn't play. That's a huge blow to find out the day of playing a top 20 matchup on the road in the rain, and you need your star wide receiver who can make big plays. You need your tight end who's not only your second leading receiver, but he's also your best inline blocker. You lose your starting right tackle in a game where you're going to play in the trenches, especially that right tackle who's known for his ability to bully people in the run game. And you lose a linebacker in a game where you're going to need linebackers in a physical game. So I thought they overcame that really well. And I was impressed by how they handled losing those players. I was impressed by the guys that came in to fill in for losing those guys. That was a very impressive road win for Oregon. The score didn't look sexy, but that's Iowa football. When does an Iowa football game ever look sexy on the box score? And then on the Iowa side of things, I don't think it's doom and gloom for Iowa. The loss is going to sting for sure. I think they really thought they were going to win that. I think they were very confident. Tough way to lose. Oregon had a lead for 58 minutes. I think Iowa's first lead of the game was with 1:40 to go. So I think part of the comfort as an Oregon fan was like, we're dominating in the trenches. We're dominating this football game defensively. We've had a lead all game. It was just that really impressive drive by Iowa at the end, which I think if you're an Iowa fan, again, it stings, but you have to look. Gronowski, when you needed him most, he stepped up. He made big plays with his legs. He made big play with his arm. I thought Iowa played good football. Their offensive line got better as the game went on. I thought Their offensive line played their best in the fourth quarter, which is a good sign of the health and the physicality of that team, not letting down, not giving up on themselves. Good football by both teams. Again, ugly box score. Good football was played by both teams, I thought, though. Both teams, I think, can walk away proud of that game.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think when we went into that game, I'll tell you right now, I was wrong about my pick to Oregon for Oregon to cover the 6.5. I thought push comes to shove, Oregon's going to go out there, they're going to take a 10-0 lead early and then just cruise on that from there. If they score a couple more scores, great. If they don't, I think their defense and they can play shot for shot from there and easily cover the 6.5. And obviously the middle finger game that I made in our preview show, that didn't necessarily happen. But I think this goes back to reminding you what everyone was saying about Oregon at the beginning of the year. This is one of the most loaded rosters in college football. It's not one of the most loaded starting lineups. Obviously, you want a DeCorian Moore. Obviously, you want Kenyon Sadiq. You want your high-level, high-end players. But missing out on those guys, it doesn't mean you have scrubs behind them. What I was most worried about for Oregon is you're going into this rainy weather game where a game where you expect to not be able to pass the ball. You expect to not be able to throw the ball. You expect to not have a ton of open receivers. And Iowa knows that too because of just the way they want to play. So they're going to try to sell out to stop the run. And you're missing out on your right tackle. At that point, I was like, oh man, Oregon might be in trouble here because you don't have one of your best blockers who's just known for bullying people in the run game. You might be in trouble. But Oregon went out there. I think it was one of the worst rushing defensive days for Iowa football in like the last 15 years. They gave up 7.3 yards per rush, 260 on the ground. Just the fact that Oregon has that gear in them where we've seen it their last two games. They see the pass game's not working. They see like it doesn't matter how good Dante is or our receivers are or who we have in there. We don't have the ability to trust this pass compared to a couple runs here, a couple runs there. No, Whittington, awesome. Like ridiculously good. And I thought Oregon was setting themselves up to maybe lose this game in a heartbreak. I think you texted me that too. But what excited me in general was this is a game that proves Oregon can win in any way. They can beat you in a shootout if that's what the game dictates. But they can beat you in a knockout dragout fight, and that's what this game dictated. So that excited me about that. I mean, do you want to have the officiating conversation? That was I hate bagging on officiating because it sounds like we're just eating some sour grapes here. Like it sounds like we're complaining for no reason. But Iowa had one penalty for 0 yards in that game. Oregon had 5 for 57.
It was the kick out of the back of the end zone too. Like it wasn't like a flag that was judgmental. It was like, okay, this guy kicked the football out of the back of the end zone. We have to throw one. In terms of judgment calls, they had 0. Even though there was probably 30 plus egregious holdings that impact, not like a chippy hold on the side that didn't really impact the play. Like it would have been a 2-yard loss if it weren't for this egregious holder. Or there was that picture of Mateo about to sack Gronowski, and the tackle has his jersey and he's standing behind Mateo with 2 fistfuls of the jersey. Mateo's jersey stretched about a full 2 feet, and he's trying to sack him and he can't. I'm like, and the ref is right there watching it. I'm like, dude, just unbelievable. And then the phantom PIs that happened. Yeah, that was one of the worst officiated games I have ever watched. And I'm trying to say that as a neutral, just like the fact that you have announcers that were even I don't think they were partial towards Oregon in any way, shape, or form. They were saying, I don't see how that's a flag, or I don't know how they got that wrong. I don't know what they saw there. It was egregious. And I mean, the conversation, the hard part about reffing, and I'll shout out Lane Kiffin because he said it best recently. The hard part about reffing is there's no accountability. Like we could sit here and have this like you could go on Twitter and you could make a compilation of every wrong call and you could have a perfect analysis, a perfect logical reasoning for everything. And it'll never matter because nothing we ever could say or do could change the impact that they'll have on a game. And as Lane Kiffin said, like if we're going to have accountability for coaches and accountability for players, then why not accountability for refs? Might as well make it all 3 phases. It was incredibly sketchy and just downright horrendous. But it is what it is. I think that adds to, if you're Oregon, it adds to the lose those players before the game. You're playing on the road in a rainstorm, and you had those go against you. You come out and get the win. Gives you a lot of confidence in this team, and just like, this is a really young team. I think a lot of people don't realize this is, I think, the second youngest team in the Big Ten and the fifth youngest team in the country. Their average age is incredibly young. They have
Yeah.
almost no senior starters. I think they have 3 on the entire roster. So it's a young team, and to win a game like that was very impressive. I think box score warriors might not like the passing stats from Dante, might not say it looked good, but if you watch the game, you can see it was pouring. It was tough out there. It would be nice to play in a non-rainstorm so the Ducks can at least have some sort of a passing attack, because even I'm falling into the trap of like, can we really throw the ball? But I just got to remind myself it's been a rainstorm and then it's supposed to rain next week when they play Minnesota, but we shall see.
On Friday. That's also another thing about the Oregon season. I think Dan Lanning and the administration at Oregon sent in a memo to the Big Ten, I think week 2, saying, hey, 8 or 9 of our games this year, our opponent has more time to prepare for our games than we do. Whether it's we both have Saturday games and our games later or whatever, but most of them are. Oregon's had multiple games this year where their opponent's coming off of a bye and they're not, or they're playing on Friday this week at Minnesota, and Minnesota's had more time to prepare for the short week game. There's a aspect of this season that just has been very impressive to watch this team grow. And I think that's the conversation a question I had for you in our preview show was, is there an aspect of this is Dan Lanning and the staff taking a step back after their Rose Bowl win last year, because they were so wire to wire good from week 1 to week 12 to the conference championship game last year, went undefeated. And obviously they were senior laden. They had a lot of talent on that team, but they weren't prepared for the conference title game against a juggernaut Ohio State team that decided to finally, not for the Rose Bowl, that decided to wake up. Is there an aspect of watching this team now play, staying in the hunt against Wisconsin, even though Wisconsin's not great, but it was pouring rain, they couldn't throw the ball. Wisconsin knew they were going to run it the whole time. Oregon knew they were going to run it. Something had to give. Oregon bullied their way to win. Same thing happened in the comeback against Iowa yesterday. Is there an aspect of we are going to start seeing the best versions of Oregon football for the rest of the season in this month? They have Minnesota, USC, and Washington to end the year.
I think the Oregon fan in me would say I hope. And Josh Pate had a good comment earlier this week in it. He talked about last year how Ohio State, as the year went on, they got better and better and better. Obviously that, it's not linear. Like you look at the Michigan game last year and they lost that, but they got better as the year went on. They gelled more as the year went on. And then they started playing their best football in the college football playoff. Tennessee was kind of their, like, I think Michigan was the loss that they needed almost to like get right. They get in the college football playoff. They really started to show out against Tennessee, and then you saw them destroy Oregon. I mean, they were on a warpath. They just destroyed everybody in the playoff, and they looked unbelievable. Ryan Day made the comment of like, our season was a build-up to become that. We knew we were that. We needed to get there. And I think, like as you mentioned, last year Oregon was wire to wire great, but they didn't necessarily get better as the season went on. This year, I would like, Josh Pate made the comment where he said he talked to Dan Lanning, so I guess there's more than just a conspiracy. And Dan made the comment about how it was important for them to take after Ohio State and learn how, hey, we have a very new roster this year. We lost a lot of seniors to the NFL. We're going to have a lot of new faces, a lot of young faces. I don't expect us to be the best team in the country week 1, but by the end of the season, like I expect to see the best version of ourselves. I think there's some truth in that, but also like I have to be analytical and critical here. Oregon played their best football in the first 3 weeks of the season. And since then, it's not bad football, but it's, and they're, you can make the fair excuses. They're playing better teams now. They played in shit weather the last couple of weeks, but regardless of the excuses, they played their best football weeks 1, 2, and 3. And it's been a little bit more middling. There's been a little bit more open gaps. They haven't been I feel like there was a kill switch in Oregon the first few weeks where they turned it on and they would never turn it off. And they looked like the best team I'd ever watched. And then the last couple of weeks, they haven't seemed to have that in them. So we'll see if that pans out. It's not linear, so I'm not like saying they've failed this task, but I think I would like to see them prove it a little bit more. They're going to have a chance against Minnesota at home. It's going to be raining again. They'll get USC and they'll get Washington. Hopefully, in two of those 3 games, they can show us like the development that they've had. They're going to have opportunities against good teams to do that. It's all 3 of these teams are, I believe, 6-3 for Minnesota, and then 3 lost for Washington, and then 2 lost in USC.
Yeah.
So
I almost said 2 loss for Washington.
No. They lost to Wisconsin yesterday. We'll get into that. Big Ten standings as we see right now. Indiana, Ohio State still lead the way. They're both undefeated overall, undefeated in the conference. They're right now on a collision course for the Big Ten title game. Unless one of them loses one game or two, they're not going to be there. You can guarantee them to be in the Big Ten title game. After that, it's USC, Oregon, Michigan, who are 1 loss in the conference. USC and Michigan have 2 losses overall. Oregon just has the 1 to Indiana. So there's a lot still to iron out in the Big Ten, but it's starting to take shape a little bit. There's realistically 2 teams that are guaranteed to be in the college football playoff with Indiana, Ohio State, unless they fully unravel, which I don't think they're going to. And then USC, Oregon, Michigan, I would expect 1, maybe 2. I think if USC were to make it, they need to win out, and that includes beating Oregon. But if Oregon wins out, they're going to be that 3rd team from the Big Ten into the college football playoff. Michigan, same thing. They need to win out, but that includes beating Ohio State. And that's where the confusion starts building. Is like, if Michigan beats Ohio State, they have 2 losses. Ohio State has 1. Then Oregon, let's say they win out. Like, then it gets even more murky. But Iowa, you feel for them because they got 2 conference losses. They're 6-3 overall. In those 3 losses, they've lost by a combined 10 points. We talked a lot about Oregon so far. Have to that was a really damn good team by Iowa, and that defense is nasty. The run game, they unapologetically run every time. And if they're going to drop back a little bit, it's probably because Gronowski's going to take off with the ball. Gronowski was the FCS Heisman last year, and I think he has 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions this year. So every quarterback that goes to Iowa, their passing game statistics just tank. But I mean, look, Oregon beat Iowa in total yards yesterday. Iowa's better on 3rd down. Iowa's better on 4th down. Oregon didn't go for a single 4th down yesterday, which was surprising. And then Iowa had more passing yards than Oregon yesterday. Iowa had more yards per completion than Oregon yesterday. Oregon bullied Iowa. That's how they got this done. They ran the ball more until they got into scoring position or into the end zone. I do want to point out one thing we haven't mentioned necessarily yet is the Oregon pass defense. Even though it wasn't needed much in this game, it's killer. Like they had a couple hiccups on that final drive by Iowa, but you could argue that's rainy weather, that's tired team, that's a team on the road from the West Coast. Some of those mix-ups happen, and you're missing a bunch of players on both sides. But that Oregon pass defense, I think that excites you if you're an Oregon fan going down the stretch for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like against USC, USC is a good football team, but I think Oregon matches up well. And I kind of think about the way Notre Dame and Oregon, despite what CBS might try and tell you in an article by a guy who hasn't watched a game this season, are very similarly built. They're built to beat you in the trenches with big physical linemen, both sides of the ball, big, strong running backs, and they have good quarterbacks and good receivers, so they can throw the ball for sure. But if Oregon and Notre Dame are controlling a football game, best believe it's going to be through 250 plus rushing yards. It's going to be on the ground. I think like a USC game for me, you're going to see an Oregon team that's going to probably try to run all over USC. And USC is a team that throws the football, and they're good at it. But USC hasn't played a pass defense quite like Oregon's yet. Notre Dame, I think, was as close as they'll get. And Notre Dame did very well in shutting down a very potent USC passing attack. And I'm excited for that. I think Oregon, they haven't been tested much through the air. The Indiana game was probably the closest. And even in that game, I thought they did really well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes with Mekhi Lemon and Jaden Maiava and that team. But I'm excited for this pass defense to get tested like that. I thought they played really well. The only big play that Iowa had in the air, it was 2. It was the very end of the game, that huge play to their tight end over the middle. It was, if everyone else had clamps, the 2 safeties for Oregon just kind of I think they thought the other guy was going to take him, and then neither of them did because of that. That's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate blown coverage, but that's not so much as a sign of like, oh, it's a bad pass defense. And it was, if one of them picks them up as they should have, that's either a sack or a pick. So that goes unfortunate. And then they had the other one, was a really well-designed play action where he kind of snuck under the linebackers and went deep. That was just a good play design and a good play by Iowa. But other than that, pass defense played really well. We won't harp on Oregon too long. The red zone defense is a serious problem. Maybe the worst play call I've ever seen defensively was when Iowa went. So I had texted Farbode when Iowa at the final drive got to the goal, or whatever in goal to go. And I text Farbode and I say, I guarantee you, they will run QB power, and that's how they're going to score. When Iowa went 5 wide and it was 5 down linemen and Gronowski, I was screaming at my TV, run, run, run. You know that Iowa with the game on the line is not throwing that football. You know they're going to run it, especially with their quarterback who's kind of strong. He's big, strong, good runner. And Oregon takes out 2 of their D linemen to bring in 2 corners, and then they go 3 down linemen, and they put, like, he's a linebacker, but he's more of an edge rusher as the spy.
Made him
and yeah, and you can guess what happens, right? 5 down linemen with only 4 guys to cover the quarterback, easy walk-in touchdown. It was the most obvious play call. It was the most obvious situation. You knew it was coming. You had the personnel, and you took them out of the game, and then it happened, and that was unfortunate. But that was just, Oregon has a terrible red zone defense. I think it's going to be what ends their season at some point this year, and that was the epitome of it. Just don't know, like, bad linebacker play has been why they struggle in the red zone, and they relied on a bad box and a bad play call, and relied on a linebacker to make a play, and unfortunately, it's just not the way the Oregon defense is built for.
Right. All right. We don't need to harp on that game too much. Great comeback by Oregon, even though you could argue they shouldn't have needed to come back in that game. They had a couple blown opportunities that kind of set up Iowa to score. Good win by Oregon. Let's get into our picks. Jason, I'm going to hand the ball off to you. Do you want to give the breakdown of our picks from last week?
Let's run through it. All right, so let's start with the game picks. We had 5 game picks. We were at 10 the last couple weeks. Slate wasn't as juicy, so we went back to 5. We came into the week, Farbode, you had a 2-game lead over me. We both went 3-2, so no ground was made. So first game we picked was the Friday night, Tulane at Memphis. It was a really fun game to watch, high scoring, almost a great comeback. Tulane outright wins, and they covered. You were on Tulane, I was on Memphis. Second game was a noon game, BYU at Texas Tech. This was College Game Day. I was on Texas Tech. You were on BYU. Texas Tech in incredibly dominating fashion. They look really good. They're severely underrated. I've seen people make rankings that were based on eye test only, and they had Texas Tech at like 8 or 9. I was like, if we're going eye test only, they're probably 2 or 3. Texas Tech dominates. I was
6.
on Texas Tech there. Yeah, at least 6. You were on BYU. Unfortunately, they couldn't get it done for you. Game number 3 was Oregon at Iowa. Iowa was 6.5-point favorites. I was on the Hawkeyes. They covered, did not win. You were on the Ducks. They won, but did not cover, putting me at 2-1 and you at 1-2. Texas A&M for the 4th game at Missouri. Missouri was plus 6.5. We were both on A&M. They dominated that game. That should back Missouri out of the rankings. We shall see, though. And Texas A&M, they're talking about a team that's getting better as the season goes on. Mike Elko has his team playing their best football right now.
They're ascending still.
Yeah, they look good. And then last game we picked was LSU at Alabama. First non-Brian Kelly game for LSU. Alabama 9.5-point favorites. This was, I believe, the night game on ABC last night. You were on Alabama. They got you a big win there, or a big cover there. I was on LSU. They didn't get it done, but they looked. I guarantee you, if Brian Kelly coaches that game, they lose by 3 or more scores. They actually had a run game that looked pretty decent. That was an improved version of LSU. I thought it wasn't enough to get the cover, but if you're an LSU fan, I was watching that game thinking I would be happy with this performance, all things considered. You finally looked like you had a run game. Your defense finally looked like they had a life. So I thought that was good for them. But Alabama still with the cover and a good win. Ty Simpson's balling. That guy just doesn't. Him and Julian Sand, they don't miss throws. When you watch them play, they just do not miss throws. Every time somebody is open, it is on the money. Mendoza, too. I'd put him in that category. But Tyler's good in that game. I thought LSU, Alabama didn't dominate, I think, the way some people wanted them to. And I've seen people I've seen articles and they kind of downplay the Bama win there as if they played poorly. When you have a team as talented as LSU, after a coach firing, you have no idea what kind of team, that talent is good enough to beat you. And when you lose their coach, a coach that they didn't like, I think, you don't know what kind of team you're going to get. And I thought you got a good version of LSU, and I thought Alabama, they covered. They won by double digits. They handled that game well, I thought. It wasn't as sexy, but I thought they played good football against. You have no idea what you're going to get. It's hard to prepare for that the same way you would if they had Brian Kelly. So a good win for Bama there.
Right. For shot in the bark, my shot in the bark didn't hit. I had BYU, same in our picks. I had BYU covering the 10.5. They didn't. Texas Tech shut them down. We'll get into Texas Tech in a few. Jace, I think this is like 2 weeks in a row for you. You had Cal plus 20.5 at Louisville. They not only covered for Jace, they gave him the outright win. So I came into the week with 10 points. Jace came into the week with 9. That the cover plus the outright win for Cal takes Jace into the lead in shot in the bark for the season. He has 12 points over my 10. Hopefully I score this week because Jace is on fire, and I mean you got to calm down at some point, man. For the F4D parlay, we went 2 for 4 on legs this week. We're 23 of 40 overall. A&M minus 6.5, Clemson minus 2.5. Those ones that hit easily. TCU, we were on them minus 6.5 against Iowa State. TCU kind of choked that game away. They had a couple score lead. Congrats, Logan, on the win, but kind of hurt us in the parlay. And then we expected Kansas, Arizona to be over 56.5 because it was just going to be a crazy OG Pac-12 style shootout, but they only want to score 44 total points. So with that, rounds up our picks. Somehow I feel like we're just going to be even for the rest of the season, Jace. It's been like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. Like you've closed the gap on me, but at the same time, I feel like I have a 2-game lead. I've had a 2-game lead for like the whole season now.
Yeah, I can't get over the hump. We just keep going 3-2.
Which, hey, I'd rather continue going 3-2 than 2-3. All right, cleanup crew time. Let's talk more about the games of the weekend. Omar Cooper, his toe saves Indiana's hopes to remain undefeated. Indiana had to come back against Penn State. They ended up beating them 27-24. Fernando Mendoza made a couple great plays on that final drive. I mean, really spirited effort by Penn State. Ethan Grunkemeyer and the run game there, the defense. It was going to be a tough. I think like you said, what people forget about Penn State is minus Drew Aller on that team right now, and I know James Franklin's not the coach anymore, but we didn't say Penn State was a national title contender and this was natty or bust for them this year because James Franklin was their coach. We said it because their roster is good. So that's where you struggle to find how to handicap games like this or LSU games, because Auburn, we just knew their roster was all right and their coach wasn't great. LSU and Penn State, we knew their rosters were really good. They had talent on the team. Clemson too. So it can always show up at any point. So playing on the road at Penn State against a really good roster, but with a true freshman quarterback, anything can happen at that point. It was a really spirited effort by Penn State. They still have the run game. I don't know if you saw the video, but I think it was on Nicholas Singleton's 60-yard touchdown run. The ref kind of blocked one of the Indiana defenders, giving Singleton an easier path to the end zone. I was like, oh man, that if anyone wants to say the refs are in on it, that refs in on it. But you have any thoughts on that game?
Maybe he was friends with Chauncey Billups. No, I think that my thoughts on that game, the narratives I've seen after that game have been very interesting. My own narrative would be exactly what you said. Penn State's, they've been in a little bit of a spiral since losing to Oregon earlier in the year. But I don't think I think that was that was more of, you brought everybody back. All these seniors who are going to be first, second, third round picks, you bring them all back, you pay this DC all this money. James Franklin's kind of in his do or die season. You lose a heartbreaking game at home, white out at night. And I think that was they didn't lose all those games after because they're actually a bad football team. They lost those games because their spirit was crushed. You have 20 starters sitting there thinking, damn, I should have went to the NFL. Screw this. You've got a head coach thinking, when am I going to get fired? Right? You have a team in disarray. And I think that's why they lost those games, not because they're a bad team. And I think this game against Indiana was the perfect kind of, they get beat at Ohio State last week. And I think this was the perfect game for them to say, you know what, we're at home. We've had this nasty stretch. Let's get right. Let's get our minds right. Let's get our bodies right. Let's come together as a team. Let's rally around our interim coach. Whether we like it or not, we're in this situation. Let's go out and try to compete against a good team that we know we have the talent to beat. Despite them being number 2 and us being 3 and 5 going to that game, we got the talent. And I think they rallied around it and they showcased that talent and they played a really good football game. And I'm saying all of this to get to the take of I was impressed by Indiana. It's a 3 and 5 team, and I think people will try to discredit this Indiana win and maybe say it was Penn State, whatever, you should have beaten them by more. I thought they got a really good shot out of Penn State. Penn State stood tall, threw some punches and took some punches. And Indiana, I think, showed a lot of guts to go out and close that game out and win. I think they got a better punch than they thought they would. And when it mattered most, they made the plays offensively and defensively to get the ball back, drive down the field, and win the football game. That's what great teams do. Don't let anyone change that narrative that it was Penn State. And on the flip side, I think you have to then think to yourself, okay, all these teams that beat Penn State, you can't call Oregon a lucky. They should have beaten Penn State by more. They suck. But then also Indiana gets a gritty win for coming back. I think they both are good wins against a good football team that they got their best shots with. So I've seen a lot of crazy narratives, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to say, yes, it wasn't Indiana's best performance, but when it mattered most, they got stopped defensively, and then they went down the field and scored the touchdown offensively. That is what great teams do, and that's what they did.
It's the same thing you said about Oregon not beating Iowa by more. And yes, you'd like to see a more complete game. Yes, you'd wish you just saw that game with better conditions. But in the end of it, winning is a skill. And I would argue losing is a skill too. But winning these close games, making the plays that are needed, Omar Cooper getting that toe in on second or third down, that's still a skill. That's a coach that knows how to game plan, and he has a full game script for the whole entire 60 minutes of the game. It's not just opening drive script the game. It's they have a plan. And Dan Lanning said it after the game, like they designed their timeouts to make sure they have them within the last minute so they could come back in the event that they needed to come back. And same thing with Curt Cignetti. He's like, you saw his post game presser. He was emotional. He was amazed and shocked and proud and impressed by his team. But at the same time, that's a sign of a well-coached team. So good win by Indiana, tough loss by Penn State. I do want to bring up one thing that's not on our sheet before we go to the next game, Jace. The Toilet Bowl also happened yesterday. The 1-8 Sam Houston State beats 1-8 Oregon State to improve to 1-8 themselves, 21-17. Oregon State had 28 first downs. Sam Houston had 8. Oregon State had 6 third down conversions. Sam Houston had 3. Oregon State had 474 total yards. Sam Houston State had 157. Oregon State had 286 passing yards, 188 rushing yards. Sam Houston State had 85 passing yards, 72 rushing yards. Oregon State had fewer penalties.
How do you lose
Oregon State had 15-minute game time of possession advantage, and they lost by 4. So that's the Toilet Bowl there. Let's move to Vanderbilt. They needed overtime to beat Auburn. What's your takeaway here? Oh, wow, Auburn's offense is actually working despite firing their supposedly really talented offensive play calling head coach. Or Diego Pavia might be the Heisman.
Part of me wants to do the SEC bias, but the other way around and say, well, they clearly suck because they had to hang in there against a bad Auburn team. No, I'm not going to do that. Again, Auburn's a skill. Football team. Yeah, winning is a skill. Auburn is a football team loaded with talent. They've had a rough season, wins and losses, because they've had Hugh Freeze coaching, and he wasn't doing a good job. The offense had sucked, and first game without Hugh Freeze, all of a sudden, hey, yeah, these 5-star wide receivers that we have, this stud receiver Singleton we got out of the portal. What do you know? They actually can play football, and all of a sudden you get a good football team punching above their weight, angry without a head coach. It's hard to game plan, like I said, for a team when they just fire their head coach. You don't always know what you're going to see out of them, especially a head coach that I think the players were ready to move on from. Like the James Franklin scenario, when he was fired, all the players were pissed and angry and sad, and they seemed to love James. They didn't seem to agree with the decision to fire him. On the flip side, with Hugh Freeze and Brian Kelly being fired, these were teams that I didn't hear one player say anything, in condolences of their ex-head coaches. So I think you get a fired up team out of that. And Auburn's offense played really well. Now, I will say Vandy's defense looked atrocious. And that's going to have to get cleaned up if they're going to go further this year. But again, winning is a skill. Good teams find a way to win. Diego Pavia, me being one of these people, one of the things I've said all season, I don't think he does enough just to win is what I'd said all year. Like he would throw for 140 yards and a pick, but he would throw that late touchdown or make that cool play at the end of the game that makes people say, "Oh, Heisman." But I'm like, but he was not great for the first 3.5 quarters. He was great all 4 quarters this game. He was great in the air. He was great on the ground. He was efficient. He didn't turn it over. He had 4 or 5 total touchdowns, passing and rushing. He looked awesome. And every single time Vanderbilt needed a play out of him, he made it. And that, again, that winning is a skill. That's what great teams do. I was really impressed by Diego Pavia. I was impressed by Vanderbilt. I think that solidified, like, they are a good team that can win in different ways. I do think their defense looks horrible, and that's probably good. I think there's a ceiling on this Vanderbilt team because I don't think you can get gashed by an Auburn team as much as they did and expect to win an SEC championship or win multiple games in a playoff. They're a fun team. They're a good team. But that's my takeaway. Great offense. The defense is going to have to shore up if they want to go far in the playoff and achieve all those things. But I liked it a lot. Diego Pavia, I like him in the Heisman race. I still don't know if I would have him as my Heisman quite yet, but I like him in the top 5, maybe at 5.
The crazy part of it for me is I was writing down Diego Pavia's statistics from the box score. 377 pass yards, 3 pass touchdowns. And I was like, okay, that's it. And I went down to the rushing stats. He carried the ball 18 times for 112 rushing yards and another touchdown on the ground. In other words, it was a Diego Pavia game. Like, if Vanderbilt's offense was going to do anything, it was because Diego Pavia was the point guard of the attack. The other thing I want to point out, I know you mentioned it. I mentioned it off the top of this topic, but Hugh Freeze is a supposed play calling wizard, right? In the first game post Hugh Freeze, Auburn beat Vanderbilt in rushing yards, total yards, first downs, and total plays. That might be the game after head coach, the interim coach bump that people call. But there's also just an aspect of, man, maybe he clearly wasn't just setting that team up for success offensively.
I think there has to be some of that, right? Like, you have Eric Singleton Jr., who is one of the top transfer portal wide receivers. He was really good at Georgia Tech. Everyone assumed he'd be good at Auburn. You have Cam Coleman, who is a 5-star wide receiver, who's a freak of nature. You have a couple competitive quarterbacks in that room, and they never seemed to be able to put it all together and get it done this season. And I mean if Auburn had come out and looked slow offensively and also laid a stinker, then I think it's fair to start asking questions. Maybe it wasn't Hugh Freeze, maybe it was the O-line or whatever excuse you wanted to give. But the fact that they came out and hung 38 on a solid Vanderbilt team, you threw for 350 yards, 2 touchdowns, you ran for 210 on almost 6 yards a carry. The offense was there. The O-line clearly was there. The players were there. The team was there. And it came down to, I think poor coaching. You had Cam Coleman. So I say this to Michigan State fans too, or we say this, I guess. It's crazy what happens when you get your stars of football. Cam Coleman, 10 receptions, 15 targets, 143 yards and a touchdown. Eric Singleton Jr., 11 catches, 13 targets, and a carry for 104 yards and a touchdown. Get the ball into your stars' hands, and good things happen. They lost, but they scored 38 points, which I'm doing the math. That's probably, they scored 3 against Kentucky, they scored 17 against Missouri, and they scored 10 against Georgia, and they scored 10 against Texas A&M. So they scored more points in that game than those 4 games combined. That's the difference between Hugh Freeze and not Hugh Freeze. Yeah, that's horrible.
Moving to the next game, you can call it the Toilet Bowl 2.0, or you could call it the battle for the real UW. Wisconsin beats Washington 13-10, but hold up, we're not talking about the game because it has any implications. Really, I guess it does. It kind of pushes Washington completely out of the Big Ten title race and the playoff. But, I mean, if you haven't checked online or Twitter or the box score, Wisconsin had 4 guys throw a pass in this game, 6 completions, 18 attempts through the air. Their leading passer in this win over Washington was their kicker. He had a 24-yard
punter,
completion.
Actually, he was the holder.
He's the backup punter. He's 1 for 1 for 24 yards. Hey, he averages 24 yards of completion. He might be a Heisman bound quarterback too. But all jokes aside, Wisconsin, outside of the passing game, they ran the ball 47 times for 157 yards and a touchdown. Washington, it's pretty clear when they leave Seattle and they go east, their offense is just not the same. They lost to Michigan when their offense couldn't do anything. And this game, it was pouring rain, it was tough conditions, and Jed Fish tried to kick a field goal late in that game to tie it up, but it was a little bit far. Everyone was kind of questioning, like, you got this vaunted offense. Why don't you go for it on fourth down? The field goal obviously is not made. Wisconsin kind of bullies them for the rest of the game and wins the game. That, like I said, there's not a ton of implications from this game, but one, good for Luke Fickell and Wisconsin. They get their first Big Ten win just days after the Wisconsin AD comes out with a letter of support and commitment for more finances and more resources for Luke Fickell and the Badgers. So good for him. Tough way for Washington to lose that game. Just going east the week after being ranked for the first time, Jed Fish's name being in UCLA, Florida, coaching search bubbles, even though I don't know if they're going to stay there after last night, but tough game there.
Yeah, I want to put a bow on the Wisconsin offense for a second here. 48 passing yards.
Please
24
do.
of those came from a trick play with your placeholder. Outside of that, they played 3 quarterbacks who went a combined 5 of 17 for 24 passing yards. The quarterback. That's the entire game, and they only ran for 3 yards a carry. So it's not like they dominate on the ground. That was a Washington collapse job. I thought they had inconsistent in the air. Damon Williams had 134 yards, but on 20 completions, so only about 4 yards of completion. He threw a pick. And then the ground game was also interesting. Damon Williams ran 19 times, and then they only ran with their backs also 17 times. Split a little bit too much there for a team that Washington fans, I think, are a team that likes to claim Damon Williams is the savior and he's all this, all that. You got to play a better football game than that. And I think Jed Fish also, like, maybe I've heard Washington fans say he's 1 foot out the door for the last couple of weeks, and this was the accumulation of that. Whether or not he is or was, I don't think he can be anymore. There's nothing about this game, if I'm a big program, that makes me think, this is the kind of coach that I want. A coach that poor scheme. Damon Williams, 32 pass attempts and 19 rushes. 51 of only their 69 snaps were Damon Williams, like, him having to make that play. I think you have to take pressure off him. You got to run the rock more. Anything. I thought it was a bad game plan by them. Yeah, kicking that field goal that you mentioned, it was 50-yard field goal into the wind. Like, you could see the rain/snow howling, like, back and diagonal. It'd be like trying to hit a 5-iron into the wind, a crosswind. Like, it was just, what are you doing? Like, why this kicker's not making this, and not really to his detriment, not because he's a bad kicker, but it was a 4th and 5 too. I think you go for that. Wisconsin, the fact that they threw for 24 yards and averaged 3 yards a carry, I mean, you can't lose that kind of football game. And it was us. I have to, as an Oregon fan, it was sweet justice, because when Oregon beat Wisconsin in similar weather 2 weeks ago, 21-7, and fans were the first people to tell you about how bad Oregon is, how bad we are, how bad Wisconsin is, how easy we should have won that game. Washington fans, sorry. So to see them lose in the same weather to the same team in even worse fashion, that was so sweet, and it was great to see all the interactions that they were quiet about on Twitter.
All right, a couple more games to get to. Texas Tech, we've mentioned a couple times already. They absolutely shut down BYU, win the game 29-7. They were shutting them out through halftime. Amazing defensive performance. Their offense showed up. Patrick Mahomes was at the game. Game Day was at the game. If that doesn't stamp, I know it was BYU who was technically ranked over them, or I know it was a true freshman quarterback that they played. Whatever. If that doesn't stamp Texas Tech as the number 5 or 6 team in the country, I don't know what will. We've said it all year. They had I don't think fluke is the right word for it, because people win and lose games. But they had one loss to an Arizona State team on the road. And outside of that, Texas Tech has dominated everybody.
And I want to be clear about that Arizona State loss. If you look at Arizona State's record, you might think, oh, wow, that's not that good of a team. That was like the one game all year Arizona State had healthy Jordan Tyson and healthy Sam Levitt. And that was a combo that made the college football playoff and probably should have beaten Texas in it last year. Like, it's not like this is some mid Arizona State team. Like, they got the really good version of Arizona State where they were fully healthy. Unfortunately for Arizona State, a lot of their losses are due to not having your star quarterback or your star receiver. And when you don't have either of those, it's hard to win football games. Texas Tech got the one game Arizona State had where they were all healthy. They had to play them on the road, and they played them tough. Texas Tech showed balance. We know about their passing attack. They were pretty solid through the air again. And then on the ground game, I think the final rushing number was 150, but that's because they had negative 50 yards in sacks. And that is, in college football, that counts for your rushing. So take away the sacks. Yeah. They ran for just about 200 yards, averaging 5.5 a carry. So they showed the ability to run the ball on the ground. They showed the ability to throw it, as we have known. Defensively, they've been dominant all season. This is probably one of the better offenses they were going to play, at least one of the most physical offenses they were going to play. And time again, Jacob Rodriguez, man, his ability, his nose for the football. Every single time defensively you need a big play, not is he just making a stop, but he seems to always force a fumble, always in the way of interceptions, tipping the ball in the air. He is a beast. And we're having some really good quarterback play. And the Heisman, let's be real, it's a quarterback award now. It's going to go to one of the quarterbacks. But he better be in New York. He better be a finalist. He is unbelievable. He is by far the best defensive player in the country this year. And that's saying a lot because Aiden Fisher exists. So Jacob Rodriguez, please put him in New York. I hope he does. He's a little undersized, so it'll be interesting to see what would happen to him in the NFL. But for now in college football, man, he is one of the best, most underrated defensive players in the country.
He's one of the best stashes in the country, too. I mean, on the season, he's 48 tackles, 1 sack. Is that 7 forced fumbles and 3 interceptions? Does he have 10 turnovers on his own?
Yeah. He's
how is that
of nature?
That is, oh my God, he's forced 10 turnovers on his own,
and they're not fluky. That guy he's getting lucky. No. Like he's like peanut punching the football every chance he gets, and his interceptions are like he's 6'1", so he kind of will like sink down behind the D line, but you can see him flowing with the quarterback's eyes, and he'll just jump a passing lane, and quarterback never sees it coming. That's a team I hope Oregon doesn't play because Dante Moore sometimes has trouble. The linebackers, he just doesn't see him sometimes. Jacob Rodriguez could have like 5 interceptions.
Next game, it's actually a combo of games. We talked about Alabama LSU already, but imagine if I told you at the beginning of the year that DJ Lagway and Garrett Nussmeier would be benched in a game at some point in the middle of the season. Garrett Nussmeier was benched for backup quarterback Michael Van Buren, former Mississippi State quarterback. DJ Lagway was benched for Tramel Jones. I mean, Lagway had 3 picks at the time of his benching. They lost 38-7 to Kentucky yesterday. I think I actually want you, whether it's right now or after the show, go through the game log for Florida, Kentucky. There's like a 2-minute period that like it's just turnovers back and forth. It's disgusting football.
Oh yeah, here it is. This is consecutive drives. Interception, fumble, interception, interception, end of half. 4 straight turnovers.
That's football you can be proud of right there, right? Yeah. So DJ Lagway gets benched. I don't know what that means for his future at Florida or if he's just going to be right back in there next week. There's not really much to say about this other than DJ was horrendous, and it feels like if Florida doesn't hire maybe a Lane Kiffin, he might be on his way out, maybe to Ole Miss and be Lane Kiffin's quarterback.
He's almost playing himself into like a step below that, honestly. Sometimes like a big name QB that's not panning out, think of like, and they're looking for a fresh start. To me, it seems like a scenario where he's almost going to have to like go to an entirely new conference. Like think of like when Bo Nix at Alabama was really struggling or at Auburn was really struggling. And he was like, screw this, I'm jumping ship. I'm going across the country, whole new conference, new region of the world. I'm just going to start fresh. I almost wonder if Lagway's in that boat. He's really struggling. I don't know where the fan base stands on him right now. At the beginning of the year, I think they thought he was Jesus. I can't imagine they like him too much anymore. So we'll have to see. But if you're him, I'm almost like, man, you're almost better off going fresh start. Maybe whoever Penn State hires, if they get like a good coach, almost like if you're Lagway, maybe just take a shot there. Try to go somewhere where you can still get drafted, but he does need to maybe start fresh and hit the reset button because he looked horrible in that half. He's had multiple games this year with many interceptions. He's had 3 games with 3 or more interceptions this season. I mean, that's pretty horrible. And it's not like it's because it's bad weather. It's good, crystal clear days. Whatever reason, he's been struggling.
Yeah. I don't know what to expect from Florida. Not that we need to for the rest of the year, but if anyone's still on TikTok, make sure you're following us there. One of the biggest pieces of hate we got in the offseason was us talking about Florida not being great. And every time stuff like this happens, I don't want to root against the team, but their fans kind of made us feel that way, feel a certain way about that program. There's one game that we haven't talked about yet, and I think because it was Friday night, we just haven't really discussed it. But USC beats Northwestern 38-17. It was a really impressive showing by USC. When USC can be balanced, running the ball and pass and through the air, dude, they're really hard to beat. The Big Ten came out with a statement because in the first or second quarter, I believe, USC went for a fake punt. They put their third string quarterback, Sam Heward, speaking of former hyped up prospects who didn't really pan out, in the number 80 jersey to disguise him as their punter their punter essentially. He takes the snap, he rolls out, throws, and finds a receiver because he's a quarterback, but he's wearing number 80. That the Big Ten came out with a statement regarding that play, saying during Friday's Northwestern at Southern California football game, with 13:58 left in the second quarter, 4th and 6, USC number 80, Sam Heward, lined up 13 yards in the backfield within a punt formation and completed a 10-yard pass. A second USC number 80, Johnson, is listed on the Trojans roster and punted twice in the contest. NCAA football playing Rule 9, Section 2, Article 2 is labeled unfair tactics with paragraph D starting, 2 players playing the same position may not wear the same number during the game. If a foul was identified in that moment that there were 2 number 80s on the field playing the same position, well, not on the field at the same time, but there were 2 number 80s playing the same position, it should have been an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty resulting in a 15-yard penalty and from the previous spot. So basically the Big Ten's coming out and telling you that that was not legal. That USC, they're trying to get away with something, which I commend them for. If the refs aren't calling a penalty on something, do it. It's the same thing as Oregon getting away with the 12 men on the field last year and immediately the NCAA changing the rule. If someone's not going to call it for you and it's going to give you a competitive advantage to win the game, do it. But it was pretty slimy what they did.
Yeah, I want to talk about that game too for a moment. First quick thought. Big Ten refs have been freaking atrocious this year, and that goes back to the Lane Kiffin. We need to hold them accountable because it's getting so bad that it is like they know the sport, A, and B, are they in some Italian mafia illegal gambling ring? Because it feels like
you don't even want to bring that up, but yeah,
no,
like it's gotten so bad.
To talk about this game a little bit. So first of all, when that happened, it was 7-7, and USC was punting back to Northwestern, who had went 13 plays, 75 yards in their first drive. Mind you, Northwestern did score a touchdown after that. So it's 7-7, and that happens. It should have been a penalty. I actually was with some friends, and one of the friends even made the comment, was that legal? Which, to credit to you, shout out, it's not. So that could have been a flag, and in that case, Northwestern gets the ball back and should have taken a lead. And then also in the second quarter, shortly before halftime, USC tries to throw a screen pass and it's picked off by a big man. And we almost had a thick 6. About the 2-yard line, he dives forward for the end zone. And credit to Jaden Mayava, the USC quarterback, ran the 30 or so yards with him and hits him. And it was not like a weak hit, like a true, genuine, like hit him in the arms as the D tackle's going out for the touchdown, fumbles the football on the 1-yard line, falls into USC's end zone. Northwestern, uncontested, has a guy jump on it. I don't know how he jumped on it, squirts out of the back of the end zone. USC somehow, so instead of being 20, could have been 21-7 Northwestern. At the time, would have been 21-14. USC gets it 1st and 10, back on the 25, and then they go 2-play touchdown. If you bury that touchdown or that freak play doesn't happen and you don't get, and the refs do their job, there's a world where halftime is 21-7 Northwestern. Instead, it is 21-14 USC. That is a huge, and then USC goes on to win and kind of dominate. But man, talk about like the wind out of your sails if you're Northwestern, knowing that you could have a 2-score lead at halftime and instead you're down 7. That is deflating. Again, good football teams get over that, and USC ended up dominating. But still, that is a 21-point swing in a quarter, and that's tough.
Yeah, I still think USC, regardless of that, they've kind of fallen or confirmed my theory, or everyone's theory, and I'm not taking credit for it, of USC and Washington essentially being good West Coast teams, but they confirm everyone saying like the old Pac-12 schools aren't built for the Big Ten. I know Oregon's dispelling that last year and this year, but USC and Washington, every time they go out east, they look like nothing. They can't do anything offensively, and their defense is struggling. I know USC just won at Nebraska, but Dylan Raiola got hurt in the third quarter.
And it was ugly too.
Yeah, and it was an ugly, ugly game. But then when you come home, you gotta bet USC against the lower level Big Ten schools, or you gotta bet Washington when they go to Seattle, because their offenses hum when they're at home, when they don't have to get off a plane, when they're just getting off a bus. I think that's the next step for both these coaches who have been in coaching carousel talks the last couple of weeks of Jed Fish, Lincoln. If they were to stick around, how do we get to that next step as a program where we can be 80% of our normal team when we go on the road? Because right now they are shells of themselves when they go on the road. I'm going to skip the ACC talk. We got plenty to do there. Jace, you have a very interesting conversation to bring up, and I'm gonna pitch in, but I want you to lead into it because it's a very fair argument, very fair conversation, but it's your thing. Go for it.
Yeah. So something we'll end the show on here. I wanted to talk about like the current state of mainstream media for college football and like ESPN, CBS, Fox, and talk a little bit more about the movements that we're seeing. So a lot of people are in our generation and our age and above, like romanticize, old Sports Center when we had Neil Everett and Stan Verrett, when it used to be Scott Van Pelt, and it was like real sports, real coverage, breaking down games, breaking down coverage and all of that, to what that kind of stuff is nowadays. And I feel like the mainstream sports media for college football has fallen off a cliff. On ESPN side, we've lost the traditional Sports Center. It's all just like rage bait talk shows and betting shows now. It's like Stephen A. Smith just spewing craziness, nonsense at you that like it's so nonsensical sometimes what they talk about that you don't even like, it doesn't even upset you because it's just so ridiculous. Now, and you also have so many contract disputes. You have the YouTube TV thing going on where they can't figure it out. So half the people can't watch ESPN and college football shows. I believe that's ABC as well. And you have all these mainstream media outlets that have TV deals now with conferences. So they have agendas they're pushing. ESPN, you have the SEC agenda. I think Fox is the best of these, but they have a Big Ten agenda, right? That's their deal. All these different with all the money involved and how important money has become to these and viewership has become to these, I think the quality of actual sports conversation among these mainstream media outlets is strongly decreased. And I think not only is that my opinion, but I think you're really seeing that among the general college football fandom because you see a huge push. Think of how many more people reference and talk about Josh Pate than they do about ESPN now. Think of how many more people talk about the Joel Klatt solo stuff that he does on his own podcast and whatnot, versus they talk about watching CBS article or reading a CBS article. Think of how many people watch Bussin' with the Boys and how they become a huge part of that. I think there's a whole shift, rightfully so, because you listen to Josh Pate and he'll have a real conversation about college football. He'll have a real take about a team and he'll have a real thoughts versus when you play or you listen to the CBS pregame show of a football game, they talk about, you would think that Indiana beating Penn State was them winning a Super Bowl. And then somehow they talk 2 seconds later, they talk about Oregon beating Iowa. And you would think that Oregon lost by 50 and they're the worst team to ever exist. There's no consistency in mainstream media anymore. It feels like it's people that don't deserve to talk about it. They talk about it. I'll give you a moment here. The last thing I'll say, like these CBS articles that have come out are just awful.
Oh
you can tell these are people that you can tell that they're people that never were into college football to begin with, and that's not their dream. You can tell like they were at CBS to get into like the politics side or the news side, and they got put onto college football probably because they need to work their way up. They just the verbiage they use is inaccurate. You can tell they just check a couple box scores and say what they want. You can tell they don't put a lot of thought or effort or care into what they're saying, and it's so frustrating as a fan. But I say all this like, I like that people are, you can talk to your friends and they say, oh, well, I remember when Andy said this or Ari said that. Remember when Pate said this? Did you see this clip? Hopefully that becomes flag for discussion. Did you see the flag for discussion conversation? But I wanted to talk about it because I think it's a problem.
No, that's a really good combo. Look, I think you know how based off of my day job, like there's certain things that I probably will not be chiming in on. But in general, I think that's the aspect of just the media in general right now. Like I think on media, like shows on television has grown to, they're still fighting for viewers one way or another, but it's become a lot of ways people are watching shows after cutting cords, the cable, people moving away from cable, going into YouTube TV or subscribing just to Netflix, subscribing just to Amazon. Those people those networks have now decided, okay, well, the way we still get eyeballs and attention is largely through clips on YouTube, clips on our website, clips on Twitter. How do we get the best content that can be within as short form as possible? So that's why a lot of like the daily shows that you're talking about are very hot takey, because that's what'll capture attention, you know? But
Mhm.
I do think there is an aspect of where we were even 15 years ago, where these shows, these networks, even 10 years ago, they were fighting each other for clicks and viewers. And theoretically, at that time, if you were watching ESPN, you couldn't watch FS1. If you were watching Fox, you couldn't watch CBS unless you had multiple TVs or cables or whatever. Today, obviously, with like Hulu Plus, YouTube TV, you can watch that stuff. But one of the reasons, and you brought up Andy and Ari, you brought up Pate, you brought up a lot of the shows, and you brought up what we're trying to do on this show is like, we don't think necessarily we're the smartest college football people. We're definitely not the most involved or the most connected people in the industry. We don't have sources, but what we have is honest conversations back and forth of our thoughts and opinions on the game. And I think that's what people are, as podcasts and streaming services and YouTube shows and whatever, as that's blown up, it's given people options. So it's no longer I have these 5 channels to choose from to watch football. It's I have these 50 YouTube channels to watch. I can choose what I want to watch. And that's what's blown up Bussin' with the Boys. That's what's blown up Andy and Ari. Hopefully what's gonna blow up us is it's just genuine conversation. It's two friends having fun, talking about the thing they love, and I think people seek that because it's no longer you're stuck to your 4 options. It's you have a bunch of options, and you go find whatever you want. And then the other aspect, and Josh Pate said this last year on a show, and I think it's really poignant. And it's really important to know, especially for us. And this might be just us two talking, no longer recording, but in the old days where people were fighting for ratings on TV, you were genuinely fighting for ratings. When you are in the podcast space or the digital media space, YouTube, whatever, you're just fighting for attention and hoping someone clicks on you. But if someone wants to watch Andy and Ari, there's a good chance that our show will be recommended right after them as we keep growing. There's a good, like, in our digital media space, a rising tide lifts all boats. That's a general saying. So I want those shows to do well because it's more likelihood that more eyeballs are coming into this space to one day catch on to us. So, and keep growing us, you know? So
Yeah.
that's a really long-winded way of explaining, like, there's a just different approach to how TV traditional media approaches it versus what digital media modern day is approaching it. And there's a reason that a lot of, especially in our space, a lot of people are shifting to the Bussin' people, to our type show, to Andy and Ari, to Josh Pate, because it's real conversations. They'll still get clickbaity. They'll still do a lot of things to catch viewers, and that's their job. They get paid to get viewers. But at the same time, people like
Mhm.
it because they're more authentic. And I think you're absolutely right. Like some of the articles on CBS yesterday and today, ridiculously obvious that they didn't watch the sport. They just checked out a couple of box scores and gave out grades for teams. And some of the broadcasters that are like so clearly biased. The Gary Danielson yesterday for Iowa, Rod, I forget what his last name was, but there was Rod Gilmore. Every time someone's playing Stanford, it's clear there's a problem with the other team or the other head coach. There's definitely bias and just the old media, and they still do a great
Yeah.
job. But there's a reason that our space is blowing up too.
Yeah, like I think it was Mark Jones for those that watched the Virginia Wake Forest game last night. It was 4th down from Wake Forest's 5-yard line. And Virginia at one play, touchdown, they win. Touchdown sends to OT. They don't. Wake Forest wins. Electric situation. And as someone who has no care about, I'm entirely neutral on Virginia and Wake Forest, I was just rooting for like a crazy play at that point, right? It's exciting. I'm watching it. The announcer was clearly wanting Virginia. I don't know anything about his background, but every time Virginia was making a big play, it was all excitement. And every time they didn't, it was like final play of the game. They throw like a fade route into the end zone to one of their receivers, and it gets swatted away, incomplete. He goes, fade route up in the air, incomplete. And that's how the game ended. Like, that was his call for the end of the game. And I was like, dude, Wake Forest just pulled off an upset on the road on like a 4th and goal from the 5 play and swatted out. It was a great play by the DB. How is the final call incomplete? It's got to be like, you got to have more emotion and excitement than that. And that, it was just, I'd already been feeling it all day. And then when I saw that, I was just like, man. And then seeing some of the articles this morning, it was just really, it's sad to see the death of what used to be like, as a kid, waking up and watching SportsCenter first thing every morning, going to bed watching that, waking up, going into CBS Sports and reading some articles. It used to mean something, and it's sad to see it go away, but I'm glad we have the space that we do. And like, I say this too, like, Farbo and I have biases. We're Oregon fans. We're always going to think positively about Oregon, but it's also not something that we don't hide that, oh, Oregon pays us $150 million a year on the side for us, like the way that these do with the SEC and all that. Like, we're going to tell you who we root for, and you're going to know they what.
Pay us $150 million on the side. Oh, yeah. I'll get biased for that.
Yeah. We'll at least tell you about the bias before. But, like Josh Pate, he's an SEC guy, but he doesn't hide that. Like, he tells you he's an SEC guy. And when you listen to Pate, you're going to get a little bit of SEC. But Pate's also, he cares enough about college football as just a true diehard fan that Josh Pate will sacrifice his love for the SEC if it means giving a take that he believes in, that he likes. Same thing with Joel Klatt in the Big Ten in Colorado. Same thing with Kirk Herbstreit. I love Kirk. He's like one of the few remaining that I really like. He'll sacrifice an Ohio State take if that means he's given a take for something for the love of the game. And I think like Andy and Ari, love of the game kind of guys. That's kind of what got them out of the journalism space. And if you hear them talk about it, they talk a lot about when you're in the journalism world, even as a diehard fan, they'll mention about how difficult it can be to write your own opinion sometimes, just due to connections and business deals and things that you have to navigate. And part of why they love what they do at On3 is now it's for the love of the game. Pickled is a good version of that too. It's cool. I hope that gives us an avenue, but
I think you bring up, and the love of the game thing is massive, because one of Pate's most famous stories is one of the reasons he wanted to start a show years and years ago was because he got a chance to go into a press box once and assumed he was about to walk into a press box full of journalists and hosts of shows who love college football, can't believe that this is their day job, that they get to go to college football games for free, cover college football games, and then talk about it afterwards or write about it afterwards. And he walked into a room full of people who just seemed like very down and just were like, oh, I have to be here. Or people who didn't enjoy their job. And he's like, man, if I got the opportunity they did, and I think you and I both feel that way, if our show keeps growing and we get opportunities that those guys do, I know Saturdays are great. I would love to work on Saturdays and cover college football games for a living. Like, do you realize how great that would be? And then come back home to the hotel and do this podcast and then do another one the next day. The reason shows in the digital space are blowing up is the options that are there, but also it's fans and viewers and consumers are finding out and realizing who actually loves the sport. And even if you don't realize that when you were a fan picking Andy and Ari or picking Joel Klatt or picking Bussin, the fun that they have on that show is, if that's why you want to do it, it's also, that is part of the reason that happens, because they love what they're talking about. And you mentioned Andy is a Florida alum. Ari covered Ohio State for a decade. They have natural biases, but you go into that, you enjoy their natural perspective with their biases there. They're not like Gary Danielson yesterday calling one penalty, like the play out of the back of the end zone where they called it a 2-point conversion, and Gary Danielson was like, oh yeah, that's in, without seeing a replay where the guy's foot was clearly on the white chalk and was not in. I was like, dude, you got to at least be a little unbiased before you see the replay. Yeah. Like, how do you say like that ball got, the 2-point conversion happened? I don't know. I think the general media does a good job, but there's a reason that the digital media space is blowing.
Yeah, and I think that's the way it goes well. And something to every college football fan and people in the space and people that do it for the love of the game. All of us have teams we like. All of us have conferences we like.
Yes.
We all are going to have natural biases. And I think like why I love a lot of the talking heads in the media space. And I'll give like a credit to one of my good friends. He's a big Notre Dame fan, and he's one of those fans I truly love. Because if I talk to him about Notre Dame football, he's not going to just sit there and tell me they're the greatest team to ever exist and they deserve to be the number one team overall. But he uses his fandom to give me like actual insights into the program that you would only know if you were someone who reads all the Notre Dame things. And like, I love college football. I don't have enough time to go through every single team in FBS and go through all their message boards and figure out all the inside information. And I like when Andy and Ari do that with Florida and Ohio State. They give you insights that you would never have unless you have been in those rooms. You know, my buddy gives me Notre Dame insights that I would never have unless I was a diehard Notre Dame fan. And I think some of these digital spaces, you get to hear insights on teams that, as a not a casual fan, but as a fan who doesn't see the inside knowledge of all these other fan bases, you get to actually see and hear about that. And that's cool. And it shares the wealth of information versus tuning into a betting show on ESPN and just hearing them try to egg you on to ESPN bet and use their promo codes. It's a different space. And I really enjoy what digital media and college football has become. And I love the conversations, and I love to see you and I listen to a lot of these podcasts, but having our friends migrate to listening to us, which is a lot of fun, but listening to have friends talk about Josh Payton busting with the boys. It's fun to share clips and listen to those conversations and actually have real college football conversations, not just agendas being pushed.
I think to put a bow on this whole topic, the reason those are working is not just it's real people having real conversations. I think there's a community and people seek community. I think there's a general, like the college football quote unquote community is searching for the uh, Josh Pate show, is searching for Flag for Discussion, is searching for Andy and Ari. Like that's a community. I think it's so stale seeing the TV viewer audience outside of like Big Noon Kickoff and Game Day where the audience is literally there. But television, you are in a bright light studio. It feels detached from the audience, you know? But I think with like those shows, and we'll get there one day on our show of having a live chat. Like those Andy and Ari, Josh Pate, they respond to the chat while they're live. You know, like there's stuff that like it's building a community, and I think that's what allows the digital space to have a better shot at just having good conversations because it's people having their fans right in front of them.
Yeah, like we'll have friends who might not agree with a take of ours, which is why we do this. We don't do this to have everyone agree with us. We do this to start
Right.
conversations. And it's fun to like have that conversation with the viewer and like get a better view. Maybe I think this team should be ranked higher and they don't. It's fun to have that conversation and then kind of like open up our breadth of mind, like, oh, I never even viewed that loss that way. But you know, now that you say that, oh wow, that I gained perspective. Versus like when you hear the college football playoff show on Tuesdays, to just hear these people talk to you that you know they're never going to hear your opinion. You're never going to have an opportunity to share thoughts with these people. It's frustrating to sit there and just have them talk about why this SEC team who's not good should be ranked. And you know, sitting there as a viewer, you're just saying that so you can say Alabama has more ranked wins, right? Like, you know, that's what's going on. And you also know that no matter how much you feel, you like to your point of the disconnect, me and them will never have a conversation about that. Even though Josh Pate is big and famous and we're probably never gonna have a face-to-face convo, I know that I can tag him on Twitter. And I say this because he's actually posted me on the show before. I can go on Twitter and say to him, like, hey, this is my take. And he will say back, like, he'll put it on the show and he'll talk about it, or the live chat, they'll react to it. It actually feels like they respond. And if it's not directly to you, you know that you could comment on Josh Pate on Twitter and he might not respond to you, but you know that he's going to review it and view it because the next time he has a show, he'll talk about how, oh, I was scrolling through my mentions and, you know, here's what a lot of people were saying. It feels way more real. It feels way more like, not that you can change his mind per se, but that your opinion actually matters to that and to him versus some of those big TV networks. I know my opinion doesn't matter because my opinion isn't worth a $400 million TV deal, right? So I think sometimes you just kind of feel that as a fan. And this digital platform gives you a space to feel heard, even if you aren't making the content yourself.
Well, that was a phenomenal conversation about that, but I just want you to know your opinion does matter, Jace. And for
Thank
all of
you.
our viewers, your opinions do matter as well. I want to hear from you. Make sure you're leaving reviews on our shows. Your opinions matter to us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Spell it out at Flagged for Discussion. We're on Twitter at F4 Discussion, on TikTok at Flagged4 Discussion. Your opinions matter. Let us hear from you. Maybe we'll get a tweet of yours on the show. Maybe we'll get something. If you have any questions, if you have a take, we'll get it on the show. Let's build a community. I want to say one last thing. Everything that we talked about, obviously we're including ourselves in it. Obviously our show's not at those levels, but there's a reason we want to build this. Is we think that college football coverage is in a good spot and getting better. And we love doing this and we love having these conversations. So we're just going to continue growing to hopefully be within the same realm of those conversations. With that said, you heard the socials. Jace, you got anything else?
Shout out Jonathan Taylor owners. He just capped off a third touchdown for a 50 burger. I think you're one of those. So if you're listening to this and you're a Jonathan Taylor fan, shout you out.
In my PPR league, he got me 55.6 points today. So I'm very happy with the start of that. Let's keep it going, JT. On that note, that's NFL, not college football. My name is Farbo Merkazi. He's Jace Hatfield. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Flagged for Discussion.